the savior of a franchise, otherwise known as Fast 5. So Fast 5 takes place where Fast 4 left off, and we see how Brian and Letty broke Dom out of the bus, and it's in the most absurd way possible. Brian takes his car and slams it into the bus, and the bus just flips over, and I remember when I saw that in theaters, I was like, what? Long story short, the prisoners are killed, but Dom is still alive, which is weird, because like, that's the thing going into this movie. You're just going to have to suspend your disbelief, but how the hell is Dom the only one still alive from the bus? And I guess that's really the most silliest flaws of this movie, is that this movie just possibly breaks every laws of physics. And you're just going to have to check your brain at the door and just enjoy the movie for what it is. Sometime after, they end up in one of the best locations so far in the franchise, Rio de Janeiro. And this is one of my favorite locations within the franchise, and it's definitely the personality of the movie, because Rio, it's tough, it's rough, it's dirty, it's ruthless. Brian and Mia, they go to Rio where they meet up with Vince, and it was cool seeing him for the first time since the first movie. And seeing him at first in this movie, you can tell, just like they did in the fourth movie, Vince, he still kind of holds a grudge against Brian for what he did in the very first movie. Like, there's a scene where he sees Brian and Mia for the first time. He gives Lady a hug. He's like, hey, Mia, how you doing? And then when he sees Brian, he's like, Buster. And it even continues. Like, they're sitting at a table. He's like, why Rio, Vince? And Vince is like, what, after you screwed everything up in L.A.? If there's anyone that's entitled to be mad at Brian, it's Vince. Because he was the one that tried to warn everyone, and he was the one that figured out that Brian was a cop. So Vince hooks him up with a job where they meet up with Dom and some of Rio's goons. Dom wants this particular car, and he asks Mia to drive off with it, and then a fight ensues. And it's one of the first coolest action scenes within this entire movie. And that's one of the things I loved about this movie, is that the action in this movie, they just step it up in every way possible. The action is 10 times better than the previous 4 movies combined. So Brian and Dom, they managed to get away, and they meet up with Mia at their hideout, and Mia still has the car, and in the car they find a chip. The chip contains details of the criminal empire of Hernan Reyes, who runs Rio. These details reveal that Reyes owns $100 million in cash, and Dom and Brian, they decide they're going to take it all. And that is where the plot of the movie begins. One of the coolest things about this movie is how the team assembles, which brings me to the characters. First off, after the 4th movie, Dom and Brian, they're pretty much on good terms now, and we learn that Mia, she is pregnant. And Mia, she's afraid because she doesn't want the family to break up anymore. So Mia is essentially Dom and Brian's motivation, which is one of the themes in this film and all the films combined, which I love, which is the theme of family. The 3 of them, they want to be free, and that's one of the reasons why they need this heist to work, because they want to buy their own freedom. Plus, this brings a little bit of humanity to Brian, because there's a small scene where Brian, he tells Dom that he's afraid to be a father because he didn't even know who his father was. But Dom motivates him and tells him he's not going to be like his father. As for Vince, everybody questions his loyalties, because Vince knew about the chip that was in the car that they stole. And so after that, Dom tells Vince to leave. Well, the majority of the film. I guess that's one of my few gripes about this movie, is that Vince, he's not really in the movie as much, but for the time that he's in the movie, it was really cool and it was really useful. Now let's go to the other characters. Tyrese as Roman and Ludacris as Tej. They returned after the 2nd film. It was real cool to see them after all these years. We finally get to see them again in a Fast and Furious movie. Plus they serve as comedy relief. I remember when I saw this movie in theaters, there is not one moment when they were on screen where I was not laughing. They bring back Han and Giselle from the 3rd and 4th film, and in this movie they're a thing now. They bring back Leo and Santos, played by Don Omar and Tego Calderon. They also serve as comedy relief in this film as well, and they have more of a role in this movie than they did in the 4th movie. Another one of the coolest things I like about this movie is we're not even at the climax yet. We're just appreciating the build-up to it, and everyone gets a chance to shine and show how they're useful for the heist. There's a scene where Roman and Tej, they work together to find out where the vote is in a comedic way. Leo and Santos, they put an air bomb in the bathroom stalls that link to the garage to the police station. And also they order a fake vote for Tej to practice on, but they still need Reyes' handprint. Han and Giselle, they get it by Giselle being a sexy random pedestrian. She goes to Reyes, and Reyes puts his hand on her and makes his way down to her butt. When she's wearing a bikini, she comes back with the bikini with Reyes' handprint, and voila, there's the handprint. Now I know for some people, like the die-hard Fast and Furious fans, some people probably didn't like this movie because it went from a street racing movie to a heist movie. Now, I understand where you're coming from, but at this point, you're the 5th movie in the franchise. You need to switch it up a little bit and reinvent the franchise. They still keep the racing aspect within 2 scenes. Like, there's a scene where Dom and Brian, they need a car, and so they go to the street racing world in Rio, make a deal with someone, and then the scene cuts, and they would go back to Dom winning the car for Brian. When I saw that, I was like, wait, what? Initially, I was a little surprised, but honestly, it's like I said, alright, look, we know this is a racing film, but the movie's about the heist, not the street racing aspect. You know what it is. In another scene, Brian, Dom, Roman, and Han, they steal 4 police cars. They do a quarter-mile race, which is funny because when the race starts, Roman turns the police sirens on. Brian doesn't want Dom to cheat like he did last time, and so Dom lets Brian win. And Brian doesn't even know it. Through all this preparation, we got 2 groups of people that are after them. First, you got Reyes and his goons. He's a ruthless businessman, and he was okay in the movie, but I've seen better villains, but he was okay within this particular movie. In the end, anyone could have played his character, but the real steam sealer of this entire movie is Hobbs, played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He is a bounty hunter sent to Rio to find Dom and Brian, because during the train sequence, Dom and Brian, they were framed for killing some DEA agents. Now, Hobbs, or The Rock, as I like to say, he is a great addition to this franchise. And Hobbs means business, and the first time he encounters Dom was on the balcony scene when they're running. And the second time they meet was on the streets of Rio in the street racing scene. And just seeing them banter back and forth, and they have the little dialogues back and forth, it was just real cool. Also with Hobbs, he has Elena Nieves, played by Thor's real-life wife, Elsa Pataki. She brings some humanity to Dom in this movie, and she becomes somewhat of a love interest to him. Because Dom, he's still dealing with the loss of Letty, and she's dealing with the loss of her husband, who died to the streets of Rio. Now, before I get to the climax, I want to illustrate how much I like Dom and Hobbs in this movie. We all know Dom is a better driver, so when he goes up against somebody, you know he's gonna win. But we have never seen anyone superior to Dom. Not superior then, superior to. Pretty much someone that is physically superior to Dom, like The Rock. Pretty much think of it like this. Dom is one of those, pen is mightier than the sword, but in this case, Dom is the sword. Like someone who is like, let's say Brian's body type will lose terribly to Dom. And Hobbs is like, okay, that's fine, the sword can be mightier than the pen, but however, is the sword mightier than the sledgehammer? Because that's what Hobbs is to Dom. I'm just saying, when Dom and Hobbs are fighting, it is the coolest shit ever. Seeing this fight was like the fight that everyone has been waiting for. And watching Vin Diesel and The Rock fight is like seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone fight. It's ruthless, shit is breaking, they're getting thrown around, punched around, and they get thrown by windows. And I couldn't wait to see it in the theaters, and I was pleasantly surprised when I saw it in the theaters. But in the end, Hobbs is on the ground and Dom is about to kill him with the socket wrench, but Mia stops him and he just hits the socket wrench on the ground. The next scene is where shit gets really real. It's when they get ambushed by Reyes and his goons. Reyes and his goons kill all of Dom's team except for Elena. And just when they're about to kill Hobbs, Dom and his team saves Hobbs. They manage to escape, but Vince gets killed, to which Dom is more than pissed off. And so Hobbs agrees to help Dom, because you don't just kill Hobbs' whole team without Hobbs being like, oh, ouch, okay, you're dead. Now, the true climax of the movie is when you're going to really have to suspend your disbelief and forget all the laws of physics. While Hobbs and Elena, they break into the police station, and Dom and Brian, they come in, they attach their cars to the Volt, and they just pull it out. They are pulling this Volt around the city, crashing into buildings, cars. This was the most absurd scene I've ever seen, because you don't just pull this Volt around town, crashing into buildings and cars and stuff, without killing someone. Doing this, they get help from Roman and Han in their police cars that they got. And then when they get to the bridge, they're surrounded by the cops, and so Brian detaches Brian, and Brian just turns around and he pulls the car with the Volt, and he just goes around crushing police cars with the Volt and crashing police cars off the bridge. But the ending of this particular scene I love is when Dom turns the car and uses the Volt to knock a police car off the bridge, and then the Volt stops and the car comes flying and collisions into Reyes' car. And the Volt stops and the car comes flying up in the air and then collisions onto Reyes' car. I love that particular moment, because I'm telling you, like, if you have surround sound, I'm telling you, watch that scene in surround sound and have the bass jacked up when you watch that scene. You're just watching the car collision onto Reyes' car. It's just the sound, and you feel it. So Hobbs and Elena, they come around. Hobbs tells Dom that he's going to give them 24 hours till he has to arrest them. But the Volt stays. But little does Hobbs know is that Brian and Dom, they were being chased by the police with the Volt. They had a 10-second window, and so they made it count. Leo Santos and Giselle, they had a truck, and they just switched Volts. They switched the real Volt with the fake Volt that Tej ordered earlier. The ending is one of my favorite parts of the movie as well. It's just, I'm telling you, when they open that Volt and they see all that money pile down, when the money came piling down out of the Volt, everyone was in contempt and excited. And everyone got their share. Dom left Vince and his family some money. When I saw that, I was like, that is friendship, and that is real love right there. Roman and Tej live good now. Leo and Santos, they're in Monaco. Han and Giselle, they're on the way to Berlin. Giselle asked Han, I thought you wanted to go to Tokyo, but then Han's like, Tokyo can wait. That was another good way to plant the Easter egg for Tokyo Drift. Then on a tropical beach, we see Brian and a visibly pregnant Mia. They're living the good life now. They're all relaxed. And then Dom and now Elena, they come to visit them. And then Brian challenges Dom to one more last race to see who's the better driver. And then boom, end credits. Now, I love the end credits because as the cast names goes, we see footage of them in the other films that they're in. Then we get a post-credit scene, which was a huge surprise for everyone. You know, I guess they're trying to follow Marvel's blueprint now, huh? And we see Hobbs, he's in Washington, D.C. He is given a file from Monica from Too Fast, Too Furious, played by Eva Mendes. But she gives him a file concerning a hijacking in Berlin. Now Hobbs is like, is Toretto part of it? And she says no. And Hobbs is like, ain't interested. We can see that he is still butthurt that he let Dom go in Rio. And we see a picture of Letty. And they're trying to imply that Letty was a part of that hijacking. But it was weird because Letty was presumed dead from the last movie. And then that scene ends with, do you believe in ghosts? And then boom, end credits. That's how you hook them. See you in a year and a half. In conclusion, the first Fast and Furious is my favorite of the franchise, personally, but I still loved Fast 5 for what it did, and it's one of my favorites as well. And it's one of the best of the franchise, along with Fast and Furious 6. Because in this movie, they step it up in every way possible. They get away from the street racing aspect of it and make it a heist film. And they try to turn it into a pure action franchise. And they go even further in Fast and Furious 6, and as we've seen in the trailers, Furious 7. I know some people probably didn't like this film because they get away from the street racing aspect of it, but at the same time, you gotta give them credit because they still made this a really enjoyable action film that is possibly the best of the franchise. And whenever a movie can transcend past the box it started on, you gotta give them credit for that. And that is why Fast 5 was such an awesome film. It is the best of the franchise, let alone one of my favorite action films of all time. Fast 5 is an A++. Now I know what some of y'all probably thinking, now I gotta do Fast and Furious 6, but I already did a review for Fast and Furious 6 when it came out in theaters. What I'm gonna do is, next week I'm going to do a spoiler review of Fast and Furious 6. Since I already did a review of Fast and Furious 6 that was pretty much spoiler free, I'm going to do a spoiler review of Fast and Furious 6 so I can go into detail about what I liked about Fast and Furious 6 and some possible stuff that I probably didn't like about Fast and Furious 6. That's it for the day. Like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Peace.